The idea that a birthday is a celebration of life, a joyful milestone marking another year around the sun, that's a comforting lie. A delicate veil woven to shield us from the deeper, more sinister truths that lie coiled beneath the surface of existence. I once saw a vision, a fleeting glimpse into the cosmic loom, where the threads of time weren't spun with light, but with the dried blood of forgotten moments. Birthdays, you see, are not merely markers of time passing. They are scars etched onto the soul, each one a potential portal, a crack in the facade of reality through which something other can peer. Many celebrate, oblivious to the shadows that gather, mistaking the flickering candles for beacons of hope, when in truth, they are funeral pyres for the innocence they once possessed. This film is not about cheerful parties or polite wishes. It is about the birthdays where the air grew heavy, where laughter curdled into gasps, and where the expected joy dissolved into a chilling dread that clung like grave dust. These are not mere stories. They are echoes from the other side, whispers of experiences that fractured sanity and left indelible marks on the very fabric of those unfortunate souls who lived them. I have seen the script of fate written in cracked mirrors, and on these particular days, the reflections showed not ourselves, but something far older, far hungrier, waiting to claim its due. Let me tell you of a night that began with a cake and ended with a silence so profound, it felt like the universe holding its breath. Imagine a young woman, her eyes bright with the naivety of 20 years, surrounded by friends, the air thick with the scent of sugar and cheap perfume. The first gift was a simple locket, beautiful and gleaming, but as she clasped it around her neck, a cold dread, sharp and unexpected, pierced through her. It wasn't the weight of the metal, but the feeling of being watched, intensely, by eyes that were not present, a sensation that coiled in her stomach like a serpent disturbed from its slumber. This locket, innocent in appearance, became the conduit. The whispers started then, faint at first, like wind rustling through dry leaves, but carrying words that seemed to claw at her mind. They spoke of her deepest fears, of regrets she had buried, and of a past she thought long forgotten. The shadows in the room seemed to deepen, to stretch and writhe with a life of their own, no longer mere absences of light but entities, presences that pressed in, suffocating the joy, replacing it with an icy, primal terror that began to freeze her very soul. And then, the singing, the familiar melody of Happy Birthday seemed to twist, to contort into a discordant dirge. The voices of her friends, once warm and familiar, now sounded hollow, repeated phrases from a script they did not write. Each note was an accusation, each syllable a nail hammered into the coffin of her perceived reality. The candles on the cake flickered violently, casting grotesque, dancing shadows that writhed like tortured souls, illuminating faces that seemed to stretch and distort, becoming masks of an ancient, malevolent amusement. The locket grew cold, burning her skin as if it were forged in the depths of an icy abyss. She tried to scream, but the sound was trapped in her throat, a strangled cry lost in the cacophony of her own unraveling mind. The birthday girl, the center of this supposed celebration, found herself utterly alone, adrift in a sea of terror while her friends, oblivious or perhaps complicit, continued their hollow song. The vision showed me her face, frozen in a mask of pure, unadulterated horror, a testament to the fact that some celebrations are merely the prelude to damnation. Consider the birthday of a child, a creature of pure innocence, his world still vibrant with magic and wonder. He receives a seemingly innocent toy, a stuffed animal with vacant button eyes. But on this particular birthday, those eyes seem to follow him, to track his every movement with an unnerving, predatory gaze. The laughter of his parents, usually a balm, now sounded distant, almost mocking, as if they were trapped in a play they could not escape. their smiles painted on like the grins of porcelain dolls. As the day wore on, the toy began to shift. A subtle twitch of an ear, a barely perceptible tilt of the head. The child, too young to articulate the profound wrongness of it all, began to cry, not with childish tantrums, but with a deep, gut-wrenching fear that radiated from his very core. The parents, dismissing it as overstimulation, failed to see the true horror unfolding. The toy was not just a toy. It was a vessel, a lure, its hollow form filled with an ancient hunger that had awakened on this auspicious yet terrifying day. The room, once filled with the bright colors of a child's party, began to bleed into shades of gray and black. The shadows coalesced, thickening around the toy, giving it an almost tangible aura of dread. The child, paralyzed by an invisible force, could only watch as the button eyes seemed to gleam with a dark, knowing intelligence. The air grew heavy, charged with a malevolent energy that felt like the breath of something unspeakably old, a presence that had waited patiently for this moment, this birthday, to finally make its claim. The parents' concern turned to a chilling indifference, their eyes glazing over as if some unseen puppeteer had taken control. They no longer saw their child's terror, only the mundane reality of a fussy toddler. This is the insidious nature of such events. They feed on obliviousness, on the comfortable denial that prevents us from seeing the cracks in our reality. The true horror wasn't the toy itself, but the veil it ripped through, exposing the raw, unvarnished darkness that lies just beyond our sight. Then there was the tale of the old man, his birthday marked not by joy, but by a gnawing sense of dread that had been his companion for decades. He had seen 70 years, each birthday a reminder of a pact made in his youth, a foolish bargain struck in a moment of desperate fear. He lived alone, his house a monument to a life shrouded in regret, the walls lined with faded photographs that seemed to watch him with accusing eyes. This birthday, he felt, would be different. The air crackled with an unnatural static, and the shadows in his antique furniture seemed to deepen, to writhe with a life of their own. He sat in his favorite armchair, the worn leather cool against his skin, a single glass of amber liquid before him. The silence of the house was not peaceful. It was a taut, expectant silence, like the moment before a predator strikes. He remembered the words of the Pact, whispered in a forgotten tongue under a sky devoid of stars, a promise of extended life in exchange for something he had never truly understood, but had always feared. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall seemed to grow louder, each tick an echo of a heartbeat, a countdown to an inevitable reckoning. As midnight approached, the room began to change. The familiar objects seemed to warp, to take on sinister contours. The shadows detached themselves from the walls, slithering across the floor like living ink. He felt a presence, cold and immense, coalescing in the corner of the room, a void from which all light seemed to flee. This was not a ghost, not a spectral apparition, but something far more primordial, an ancient entity that had come to collect its due, its patience finally exhausted after 70 long years. His breath hitched, a ragged sound in the suffocating stillness. He had lived a life of quiet desperation, always looking over his shoulder, always waiting for the other shoe to drop. And now, on his birthday, the final payment was due. He saw not a physical form, but a ripple in reality, a distortion in the very fabric of space, radiating an aura of profound dread and ancient knowledge. This was the price of his borrowed time, a debt paid not in coin, but in the shattering of his very being. The final vision was of him, his eyes wide with an unspeakable terror, as the darkness consumed him, leaving behind only cold, dead ash. Now, imagine a group of friends who decided to relive their youth with a birthday camping trip, a nostalgic journey into the wild. They sought the freedom of the forest, the crackling warmth of a campfire, the shared laughter under a canopy of stars. But the forest itself held its own ancient secrets, its own silent, watchful guardians. The air, crisp and clean, soon became thick with an unspoken tension, a creeping unease that settled upon them like a shroud. The rustling leaves sounded less like the wind and more like hushed, malevolent whispers, as they shared stories around the dying embers of their fire. One of them, a skeptic named Mark, began to notice strange occurrences. Twigs snapping just beyond the firelight, shadows that moved independently of the trees, and the unsettling feeling of being scrutinized by unseen eyes. He tried to dismiss it as the nerves of the city folk venturing into the wilderness, but a primal instinct, a deep-seated awareness of impending danger, gnawed at him. The forest was not empty, it was alive, and it did not welcome their intrusion. The birthday cake, brought out under the pale moonlight, seemed incongruous, a symbol of celebration in a place that felt inherently hostile. As the candles were lit, a sudden gust of wind extinguished them, plunging them into stark darkness. In that instant, a chorus of guttural sounds, unlike anything they had ever heard, echoed from the surrounding trees. It was the sound of hunger, of ancient rage, a symphony of primal terror that stripped away their bravado, leaving them exposed and vulnerable. They scrambled to relight the fire, their movements frantic, desperate, but the darkness seemed to press in, to swallow the light. They saw fleeting glimpses of movement in the periphery, shapes that defied natural explanation, things that moved with an unnatural gait, their forms indistinct and terrifying. This was not a bear, not a coyote. This was something older, something that dwelled in the deep, dark places of the earth, awakened by their intrusion, and their celebration had become a sacrifice. The chilling realization dawned. They were not the observers, they were the observed. Consider the story of a family gathering for a milestone birthday, a patriarch reaching his 80th year. The house buzzed with activity, with the clinking of glasses and the forced laughter of relatives trying to maintain a facade of merriment. But beneath the surface, old resentments simmered. Ancient feuds lay dormant, like dry tinder waiting for a spark. The patriarch, usually a commanding presence, seemed frail, his eyes clouded with a sorrow that no amount of celebration could dispel. He knew that this birthday held a particular significance, a final turning of the page that he had long dreaded. Throughout the day, subtle, disturbing incidents occurred. A framed family portrait, one of their most treasured heirlooms, suddenly crashed to the floor, the glass shattering into 1,000 pieces, revealing a dark stain-like mark on the wall behind it. Doors creaked open and shut on their own, accompanied by faint whispers that seemed to slither from the empty rooms. The air grew heavy, thick with an oppressive atmosphere that seemed to drain the energy from everyone present, a palpable sense of foreboding that no one dared to acknowledge aloud. The patriarch, sitting quietly in his study, felt a profound sense of being watched, not by his family, but by something else, something that had been a silent observer for decades. He remembered a promise made to his wife on their wedding day, a desperate plea whispered into the darkness during a time of great hardship, a plea that had been answered, but at a terrible cost. He had traded a piece of his soul, a fragment of his life force, for her survival, and he knew that on this, his final birthday, the debt would be called in. As the evening wore on, the whispers grew louder, more insistent, coalescing into a single chilling voice that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the house. It spoke of regret, of sacrifice, and of a darkness that had been held at bay for far too long. The family, now sensing the true depth of the unease, huddled together, their manufactured cheer replaced by a shared visceral fear. The patriarch, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of 80 years, closed his eyes, accepting the inevitable. The darkness had returned to claim its due, and his birthday was the price of its long wait. There is a tale, whispered in hushed tones, of a solitary artist who celebrated his 40th birthday in his secluded studio. He was a man who lived for his art, his lifeblood poured onto canvas, his soul laid bare for the world to interpret. But his art had always flirted with the macabre, with the darker aspects of human nature, drawing inspiration from the shadows that lingered at the edges of his consciousness. This birthday, he felt a peculiar pull, an urge to create something final, something that would capture the essence of his deepest fears, the whispers that haunted his waking hours. He began to paint, his brushstrokes frenzied, desperate. The canvas, initially blank, began to take on a life of its own, swirling with dark, chaotic energy. He painted figures that twisted and contorted, their forms contorted in agony, their eyes hollow voids of despair. The studio, usually a sanctuary of creativity, became a crucible of torment. The air grew thick with the scent of turpentine and something else, something metallic and foul like dried blood. The shadows in the corners seemed to lengthen, to writhe, mirroring the horrors unfolding on his canvas. As he worked, he felt a profound sense of connection to the figures he was creating. It was as if they were not merely images, but manifestations of his own inner demons, given form and substance. The whispers he had always heard intensified, becoming a cacophony of tormented voices, urging him on, demanding completion. He felt his own energy draining, his life force seeping into the canvas, a willing sacrifice to his art, a dark offering on the altar of his 40th birthday. By dawn, the painting was complete. It was a masterpiece of horror, a terrifying depiction of the abyss, but the artist himself was gone. Only a faint, chalky residue remained where he had stood, and the painting seemed to pulse with a dark, malevolent energy. The whispers had ceased, replaced by a profound, chilling silence. His art had consumed him, his birthday a dark ritual that had blurred the lines between creator and creation, life and its ghastly imitation. Then there is the story of a young woman, her 21st birthday, a night of planned revelry, of stepping into adulthood with a bang. She and her friends, armed with youthful exuberance and a thirst for adventure, decided to explore an abandoned asylum on the outskirts of town, a place rumored to be haunted by the tormented souls of its former patients. The air within its decaying walls was heavy with the ghosts of past suffering, a palpable sense of despair clinging to the peeling paint and rusted metal. As they ventured deeper, the playful atmosphere began to dissipate, replaced by a growing sense of unease. Laughter turned to nervous whispers, and the flickering beams of their flashlights seemed to illuminate fleeting shapes in the oppressive darkness. The birthday girl, Sarah, felt a growing sense of being watched, a cold, prickling sensation that crawled up her spine. She tried to shake it off, attributing it to the spooky atmosphere, but a primal fear began to take root. In one of the examination rooms, they found an old leather-bound journal lying open on a dusty table. As Sarah touched it, the pages began to turn on their own, revealing frantic scribblings and disturbing illustrations. A chilling whisper seemed to emanate from the journal, a voice filled with pain and madness, speaking directly to her, calling her name. The air grew colder, and the shadows in the room seemed to coalesce, forming indistinct shapes that danced just at the edge of their vision. The party was over. The playful exploration had devolved into a desperate flight for survival. The asylum, a playground for their youthful bravado, had revealed its true nature, a tomb of tormented souls, and Sarah's birthday had inadvertently awakened them. The whispers followed them out, a chilling promise that the darkness they had encountered was not confined to those rotting walls, but had now attached itself to them, a permanent, terrifying souvenir of a birthday gone terribly wrong. Consider the birthday of a historian, a man obsessed with the occult and forgotten lore, who decided to celebrate his 50th in a remote ancient ruin. He believed that on such a potent anniversary, the veil between worlds would be thinnest, offering him a glimpse into the secrets of the past. He arrived with an array of esoteric tools, ready to commune with the spirits of the place, his heart pounding with a mixture of academic curiosity and a far deeper, more ghastly anticipation. As dusk settled, bathing the crumbling stones in an ethereal glow, he began his rituals. He chanted in forgotten tongues, his voice echoing eerily against the ancient walls. The wind, which had been still, began to howl, swirling around him like a spectral shroud. The shadows deepened, no longer mere absences of light but tangible entities, coalescing and shifting, forming shapes that defied natural explanation. He felt a presence, ancient and immense, pressing in on him, a force that radiated an aura of profound dread and forgotten power. He had sought knowledge, a connection to the spectral plane, and he found it, but not in the way he expected. The whispers that had previously been a faint murmur in his mind now became a deafening chorus, a torrent of voices speaking in 1,000 tongues, revealing secrets too terrible for any mortal mind to comprehend. He saw visions of forgotten gods, of cosmic horrors, and of the true, unvarnished emptiness that lay beyond the veil of our reality. His birthday became not a celebration, but a cataclysm, a shattering of his perception, leaving him irrevocably changed. He had opened a door that could never be closed, invited entities that would never depart. The ruin, once a place of historical fascination, had become his prison, his mind forever trapped in the echo chamber of his own terror. The true horror wasn't just the visions, but the lingering presence, the cold, dead weight of those ancient secrets that now resided within him, a dark souvenir of a birthday celebration gone cosmically wrong. And what of the birthday where the gifts themselves held a sinister power? A young woman receives a beautiful antique music box. The moment she winds it, a haunting melody fills the air, a tune so melancholic it seemed to weep. But with each note, her memories began to fade. Not gradually, but in sharp, agonizing flashes, as if pieces of her past were being ripped away. The music was not just a melody, it was a psychic parasite, feeding on her experiences, leaving behind an empty shell. Another gift, a seemingly ordinary mirror, began to show her reflections that were not her own. Twisted, distorted visages of creatures that belonged in nightmares leered back at her, their eyes filled with an ancient hunger. She found herself staring into the glass for hours, mesmerized by the horrors it revealed, unable to tear herself away. The mirror was a gateway, a dark portal that beckoned her into a realm of eternal darkness, her birthday the catalyst for her descent. The celebration dissolved into a nightmare. Friends watched in horror as she became increasingly withdrawn, her eyes vacant, her responses nonsensical. They tried to intervene, to break the spell, but the objects seemed to possess a malevolent will of their own, repelling their attempts with unseen force. Her birthday, meant to be a joyous transition, became a dark ritual, her life force slowly siphoned away by the cursed artifacts, leaving her a hollow husk, forever lost in the echoes of her stolen memories and the horrifying visages of the dark mirror. Then there are the birthdays that are marked not by personal events but by cosmic alignments, moments when the stars themselves seem to conspire for darker purposes. A particular alignment, occurring once in a generation, coincided with the birthday of a young man known for his morbid fascination with the occult. He believed this convergence of celestial bodies would grant him unparalleled power, a direct connection to forces beyond human comprehension. He prepared for this night with fervent anticipation, setting up elaborate rituals in a secluded ancient grove. As the stars aligned, the air crackled with an unnatural energy. The shadows in the grove seemed to deepen and writhe, no longer mere obscurities but palpable entities. He began his incantations, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. The whispers started then, faint at first, like the rustling of dry leaves, but quickly growing in intensity, coalescing into a deafening roar within his mind. He felt an immense power surge through him, but it was not his own. It was borrowed, malevolent, and utterly terrifying. He saw visions of cosmic horrors, of entities that defied description, their forms shifting and morphing in the unholy light of the aligned stars. He felt his sanity fraying at the edges, his very being consumed by the overwhelming power that coursed through him. This was not the power he had sought. It was a corruption, a descent into madness. His birthday became not a celebration, but a gateway to the abyss, a point of no return. The cosmic alignment had not granted him power. It had simply opened the door for something else to enter. He had gambled with forces he could not comprehend, and on his birthday, he lost everything. His mind shattered, his soul tainted. He became a vessel for the darkness he had so eagerly courted. The grove fell silent once more, the stars continuing their indifferent celestial dance, leaving behind only the chilling testament to a birthday that had invited the void. And sometimes, the horrors more insidious, more deeply woven into the fabric of family. A grandmother, on her 93rd birthday, gave her beloved granddaughter a seemingly innocuous heirloom necklace. But this necklace was imbued with a generations-old curse, a dark secret passed down through the female line, designed to ensnare the wearer in a web of misfortune and despair. The granddaughter, unaware of its sinister history, wore it with pride, believing it to be a symbol of her family's legacy. Soon, a series of unfortunate events began to plague her life. Relationships crumbled, opportunities vanished, and a pervasive sense of hopelessness settled over her like a perpetual winter. She felt a constant, gnawing anxiety, as if an unseen force was always lurking, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. The necklace, warm against her skin during the day, felt ice cold at night, a chilling reminder of the darkness that had latched onto her. The grandmother, witnessing this slow descent, offered no comfort, only cryptic warnings that hinted at a destiny she could not escape. The curse was not merely about misfortune, it was about a spiritual draining, a slow consumption of the wearer's vitality, intended to fuel some ancient insatiable entity. The birthday gift, meant to signify love and connection, was in reality a death sentence, a meticulously crafted trap designed to perpetuate a cycle of suffering. The true horror was the betrayal, the love warped into a tool of damnation, all initiated on a day meant for celebration. The narrative of a birthday is often painted in hues of joy and anticipation, a brightly colored tapestry of well wishes and gifts. But peel back that veneer, and you will find the threads of darkness, the chilling whispers of what truly lies beneath. These stories are not merely tales spun from imagination. They are seeds of truth, planted in the fertile soil of human experience, their roots reaching deep into the shadowed recesses of our collective psyche. They serve as stark reminders that every celebration, no matter how joyous, exists on the precipice of the unknown, a fragile moment in time where the veil between our world and the abyss can, and often does, thin. The allure of the unknown, the magnetic pull of the forbidden, is a powerful force. It draws us to the edge, compels us to peer into the darkness, even when we know we shouldn't. These birthday nightmares are more than just cautionary tales. They are invitations to acknowledge the shadows that dance in the periphery of our lives, to confront the unsettling possibility that some celebrations are not endings, but terrifying new beginnings. They are the chills that trace your spine, the persistent restlessness that keeps you awake at night, the undeniable attraction to the mystery that defines our existence. And so, I leave you with this. The next time a birthday approaches, a time for cakes and candles, for laughter and wishes, listen closely. Listen beyond the surface merriment, for in the silence between the songs, in the flicker of the dying flames, you might just hear the echoes of these tales, a chilling reminder that some birthdays are etched not in joy, but in everlasting dread. Do you feel this dark message was meant for you? The whispers from beyond carry truths that many are not ready to hear, but every soul that joins feeds the voice that whispers from the darkness. Let us explore these truths together.